Think about your typical workday. You sit in the same chair, looking at the same screen, and follow the same routines. For your brain, this is the equivalent of a sensory desert. Biologically, we are wired for discovery, but in the modern corporate world, we have prioritized efficiency so much that we have accidentally built an environment that shuts down our most creative neural pathways. We are rewarded for having the right answers, meeting the next deadline, and staying inside our departmental silos. The result is that our curiosity, the very engine of innovation, starts to atrophy. We aren't just bored, we are biologically stuck. But what if you could redesign your workday to spark the same brain activity as a traveler exploring a new city? What if not knowing was actually your greatest professional asset? Today, we are joined by Fredrik Haren, a man who has made it his life mission to decode how creativity works on a global scale. In his book, The World of Creativity, Fredrik takes us on a journey across 37 countries to uncover the secrets of the world's most inventive minds. In this episode, we are going to explore the curiosity architecture. We are moving beyond the fluff of brainstorming and diving into how environment, ritual, and even the way we structure our meetings can physically rewire our brains for higher performance. We will be discussing how to trick your brain into a state of wonder without leaving your desk, how to bypass the fear center of the brain in meetings, and why the best companies are now measuring the quality of your questions, not just your output. Fredrik, it's a pleasure to have you with me in the Growth Hacking Culture podcast.
I'm excited to be here.
It is a full pleasure. And I have so many questions because I remember back in the days in the corporate world where we had these awful, awful brainstorming sessions of one day with a lot of pressure where we had to come back with questions. We weren't even prepared. We didn't have anything before the meeting. And the expectation was to have a lot of good ideas and to bring the bottom line up in corporations. And that wasn't working at all. And when I heard about your book, I wanted to have more questions about what drives curiosity and what can we avoid these brainstorming sessions that are so bad for human beings. Fredrik, you have traveled, in fact, to 37 countries to see how environment shapes thought. In neuroscience, we know that novelty triggers dopamine, which opens up the brain to new associations. But most of my listeners work in the same office, in the same chair every day. From your global observations, what is the one micro ritual someone can do physically to disrupt their environment and trick the brain into a state of curiosity without leaving the desk, in fact? How can we do that, Fredrik?
Yeah. Okay. First of all, I have traveled to 75 countries to interview creative people, but the book is covering 37 countries. So I had to stop sometime. So the book is 37 countries. But and what I do is I interview creative people around the world, in all kinds of professions, all kinds of countries. So to answer your question there about what we can do without leaving our desk, well, first I would say, well, maybe you should leave your desk. That's probably that's probably the first advice. But it's it's amazing how little we have to do to get a new perspective. So let me share an example of one guy I interviewed. This man he's an illustrator. It's like a cartoon illustrator. But when I interviewed him, he's actually from Switzerland.
Oh,
And when I interviewed him, he said, I'm not an artist. I'm not an illustrator. I am an observer. And he said, any good artist the art is actually the art of looking, the art of seeing, and then you just paint what you see. So I said, what does it mean to be an observer then? I said. And he asked me this question. He said, Fredrik, do you ever walk in the forest? And I said, yes, of course I do. I mean, of course, I mean, yes, I do. And he said, how often do you turn around? So I'm going to ask you the question. How often do you ever walk in the forest?
yes, I have a dog, so I need to go around
There
the
you go.
forest.
Perfect. How often do you turn around?
That's a good question. I cannot recall exactly. From time to time, it happens to me that I stop. It's not turning around. It's like I stop and I look around, but I don't look
Yeah.
back. I don't recall that.
So I asked, I mean, I said to him, maybe I turn around if I hear like some noise or something. And then I asked him, so how often do you turn around? He said, every 50 meters. And I said, what? Yeah, because then you see twice as much forest. So because you see a tree from one side, you turn around, you see a tree from another side. It's a totally different view. Every stone, every tree, every view, everything. And on top of that, the bonus effect is that the animals, they will hear you way before you hear them. So when they will hide, but as soon as you have walked by, the threat is gone and the animals come out. So now you will see more animals. But so the act of just changing the mindset of I walk through a forest and I have seen the forest, instead of saying turning around every 50 meters and you experience twice as much forest. It's I think a beautiful example of how little we have to do to change our perspective.
But what is happening in the brain? So when you stop, you are incentivizing your senses. So you have more images. You have, well, feeling is not a sense, but you get to experience more with images that are incentivizing your brain to either ask yourself more questions or to pay attention to things that we usually don't pay attention. So paying attention is something that
Exactly. Exactly. And I think this when I heard him speak about this, I realized that there's especially when you go down a road you always go by or you sit at a desk you always sit by, you also tend to look in the same places that you used to look. So maybe you don't have to, maybe you can just switch, switch your chair 25 degrees and now suddenly you're going to see what you look at. It's just a tiny example, but it shows how not only stuck in our ways we are, but also stuck in our views. So if we can just change our perspective a little bit, it can have a huge effect.
Hmm. So basically, translation of that is that you cannot be a very innovative person if you don't experience moving your perspective from one side to the other, or you don't have different experiences like the usual thing. Like staying in the office is counterproductive for any curiosity, basically.
I mean, we are doing this virtually, so I think technically you could now sit in an office, and I interview one person a day, and I do it all over the world, but a lot of them I do through Zoom. So technically now we can travel. Uh, we can technically sit at our desk and still get these new perspectives, definitely. But I interviewed a guy a couple of days ago only, and he was talking about, oh, I forgot the name because it was a Latin name, but basically it was oh, the phrase in English was all perspectives. And the idea was that whatever you're doing, you can always look at it from a lot of different perspectives. I mean, a simple example. If you're a parent, you could also look at the parenting as from the perspective of a child, and now you see parenting from a different perspective, right? But every perspective can be viewed as, I mean, basically the whole idea of stakeholders. You can think of 10, 15, 20, maybe 40 different perspectives on whatever you're working on. I'll give you a concrete example. When I wrote my book, you can write the book from the perspective of the author, but you can also think of the perspective of the reader or the book reviewer, right? Now, here's the thing. Thanks to AI, we can now ask for these perspectives, which before was very difficult. So when I wrote the book, every chapter I sent into the AI. I didn't ask the AI to write my book. I asked the AI to take the perspective of a CEO reading this chapter. What would they think? Take the perspective of an artist reading this chapter. What would they think? Take the perspective of a book reviewer at the New York Times. Read this chapter. What would they think? And every time I asked for a different perspective on the same text, I got something back that I was not able to see it myself as an author. So it's now become a much more easy. Or if Elon Musk read this book, what would he think? Or Leonardo da Vinci read this book, what would he think? Of course, it's not 100% correct, but it helps you to look at what you're doing with multiple perspectives. You can have 10, 15, 30, 40, 50 perspectives on your problem just by asking AI to take a role. That was not possible before. We had to do that ourselves. So it's a huge advantage to get a new perspective of something from someone else.
And that's a good topic. I'm going to ask you a little bit more about enhancing curiosity with the AI. But first of all, in the book, so you have selected 37 countries, but you have visited much more. Do you think that the context or the culture of a nationality of let's say it influences the level of curiosity? Do you feel like, for instance, a Latino asks more questions versus a Japanese who has more structure, who is more reserved, and who has a tendency to do things by the book? And I say that because I live with the Japanese, so I can criticize a little bit that part.
Well, okay. Well, first of all, I think there's way more differences in personalities between professions than culture or nationalities. I'll give you an example. I was recently, when I was traveling, I went to a web design agency in Bhutan and a web design agency in Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia. And I walked in there and they looked just like a web design agency in like Berlin or Stockholm or New York. You know, everything, the baseball cap, the little Star Wars figures on top of the computer. A web designer is a web designer, no matter where they live. So I think so personalities are different, and which means creativity processes are different. An artist has a different creative process than an engineer, which has a different creative process than an entrepreneur. And they're all great. They're just different. Now, I'll give you so the whole idea of going around the world is not to say what can we learn from this culture, is to say what can we learn from different perspectives. And you mentioned curiosity. So I'll give you, I think this is the first chapter in my book. I talk about curiosity, and I talk about how different languages have different words for curiosity, and each of these words show a different aspect of curiosity. So I'll give you an example. So what's your native language?
Spanish.
Spanish. So in Spanish, curiosity, I guess, is curiosidad. That's the same as English.
Yeah.
So where does that word come from? It's a Latin root, of course. It's from the Latin word cura. And cura is the same root as the word care, which kind of implies that which you are curious about, you care about. Or the other way around, that which you care about, you will be curious about. Think about it. If you don't care about something, you're not going to be curious about it, right? It's an interesting observation on curiosity. But in Swedish, curiosity is nyfiken. Ny means new, fiken means an urge. So it means an urge for the new, which is totally different than the English or Spanish version. But in Icelandic, the word is forvitten. For means before, witten means to know. So in Icelandic, they focus on that curiosity is that which comes before knowledge, which I think is most the beautiful version, because it shows you that you can't learn anything unless you're first curious about it, which means if you're a boss or you're a teacher and you want someone to learn, you should first awaken the curiosity of the person you want to learn, because try to take a child and teach them something that they don't want to learn, they're not going to learn it, but make them curious about it and they are going to learn, right? And then the last one, Bulgarian. The Bulgarian version for curious is lubiten, and it poetically translates to the love of asking questions.
Wow.
And all of these is the same word. It's curiosity, but every language gives you a different perspective on what curiosity actually is. And when you understand all of those different perspective of curiosity, now you have a deeper understanding what curiosity really means.
You have said something that is quite interesting, is that maybe professions are the thing that differentiates the level of curiosity between people. And I'm thinking back to the challenges, like myself. I studied engineering. Engineering needs to kind of modelize a lot of things, like have a process for every single step that you do. And I found it quite challenging when I went into the corporate world to get rid of this step-by-step approach. And still now, when I hang around with certain of my pals back in university, I found them, yeah, maybe because I went entrepreneur already a long time ago, that I have changed. Something has changed on my way of thinking. But my pals that are still into wanting to modelize everything without agility, is it possible to rewire your brain for curiosity, for this sense of innovation, for this thirst of knowing something, even if it is not related to the task that you have in front? Because that's the problem, no? Because we focus on the task instead of combining knowledge that then can be associated to solve a problem.
But I don't think you should look at your friends as that they have some kind of a deficit, because engineers has a very creative brain, because the idea of structuring it and making it into a process is beautiful. It's great because it's a great creative process to do. And I actually think that the people who are focused on creating a process are the maybe the most creative, because they are actually getting it done. So instead, I think you should look at it and say, I have the engineering mindset of creativity as one tool in my toolbox, but now I've added the entrepreneurial mindset as another tool in my toolbox. And then maybe the Japanese way of Kaizen from your wife, and saying now I can use a bit of a Japanese mindset of curiosity. Or maybe you said you lived in Denmark. So I mean, what did you learn about creativity from the Danes? Now you make that as another tool. So the idea, the whole idea with my book and the way I get people to think about creativity is not that they should exchange from one way to something better, that we should add the number of creative tools that we have in our toolbox and say, well, today I couldn't solve it with my Swedish way. Maybe I should solve it with the other technique that I learned from an engineer or from an artist or whatever. There are so many different ways of creatively solving a problem, and we should learn to have more of those tools in our toolboxes.
You make me think that, in fact, traveling is a great experience or a great exercise for people to enhance creativity. It's not for everybody it's possible to go into different type of places. Like, let's think about the typical Brits who will go only to Spain, or a typical Swede who will go just to Sicily, whatever. No. There is a possibility to improve our perspective by getting to know the new people. But getting to know new people is not just about the observation of what you see without interaction. Does it mean, in fact, that we need to interact with the people? Because, the typical tourist maybe will not interact with everybody. They will be afraid about, the language, they don't understand me or whatsoever. Should we interact, in fact, to benefit from this tool?
Well, I'm the creativity explorer, so I am an extreme when it comes to this. I think I was in 19 countries last year, and when I go to these countries, I make sure to interview a lot of different people and from different industries. I remember one day I was in India. I interviewed the CEO of the Tata Group, the woman in charge of the Indian space program, and the girls in the slums of Mumbai on the same day, on the topic of creativity, right? So of course, I'm on that scale. I am in an extreme version of, yes, we need to travel and meet new people, but you don't have to be an extreme to do it. But you have to do it. You can. The idea of getting a new perspective on how people look at the world is the most important part, is that it helps you question what you think is true. I give you a very concrete example. When I used to live in Sweden, I'm from Sweden, but I moved to China in 2005. And I moved as a single person. I had no friends, I had no colleagues, I knew no one in China. So for a few weeks there, before I made any new contact, I didn't speak the language, I didn't speak the culture, I didn't know the culture. I literally landed like an alien in Beijing. And for the first 2 weeks, I couldn't talk. So I would walk into a restaurant and I would order food by pointing on the menu, because I couldn't read the menu. I didn't know what I was ordering. And I would order 3 meals, because I knew one of them I could not eat because I couldn't stand it, but the other two I could eat. And then they would serve me a knife, a fork, a spoon, chopsticks, and a Chinese porcelain spoon. They would give me all of those utensils because they couldn't ask me what I wanted to eat with, and I couldn't understand. So they just gave me everything, and I didn't know how you're supposed to eat this dish. I had no idea. So for the first time in my life, I was looking at a dish saying, "Huh, I have no idea how you're supposed to eat this. I don't know how to eat this. How would I like to eat this?" It was such a liberating feeling because I wasn't surrounded by my culture saying this is how you eat this. I was making my own decision on how to eat something. And that's the core. The core is not to learn something from other cultures. The core is to see that other cultures and other people have other ways of doing it so that you liberate yourself from your own preconceived ideas on how things should be done and reach a level where you say, how do I look at the world? And or how could I look at the world?
That's a good point. Liberating yourself from your old beliefs. I have a one that has been a challenge for myself. I'm an introvert, Frederick. So I have
Hmm.
really problems to interact if I don't know the person when I go to networking events, when I go to meetings. I can speak in front of a lot of people, but interacting one to one, if I don't know the person, is going to be a painful exercise. I'm getting better, but it's not optimal. It's always painful. So how do you develop this connection to talk with people that you don't know? Have you observed that in all these cultures, do they have something that makes it, I can do it, that transforms the mindset and makes it a little bit less painful to interact with others?
Well, I'm an extreme introvert. I can promise you I'm more of an introvert than you are. I literally live on a private island because I don't like neighbors.
Well, that you beat me for sure. So how do you do it, Frederick? How do you manage to interact
I
with people?
I think I'm a keynote speaker. I think introverts are the best speakers because they are forced, they don't want to be on the stage, but they still want to go on the stage. They need the message to come out. Even extroverts just want to be on the stage.
Yeah.
And I think the same is true for introverts don't like to talk about themselves, which means they are more interested in learning from the other person if they have an interest to learn. So when I meet people, I don't network and I don't go up to random people and stuff, but I book interviews where I want to talk about creativity because I want to learn about creativity. And then I would meet this person and I said, I want to learn about creativity from this person. That's my purpose. So I think maybe the framing is I'm not meeting a new person. I am learning about what I'm interested in. I mean, you're doing this interview with me, right? So why are you doing this? Because you have your passion for your podcast, and to get new knowledge, you reach out to me, and we're not talking about you or me. We're talking about the topic. So
Yes.
that could be an approach for introverts, I think. Focus on the topic, not the person.
That is totally right. The reason why I'm in this podcast is because I thought that in order to incentivize my curiosity, meeting new people, talking about the topic, you're right. And I didn't even realize talking about the topic makes me feel at ease. I don't feel pain when I'm doing a
Exactly.
podcast. I feel the pain just when I have a meeting where I have to mingle with people. And I guess,
Exactly. And then if you go back to the meaning of the word curious, meaning to care. So if you go into a networking event and you don't care about networking and you're an introvert, then it's not going to work. But if you go there saying, I'm going to see if I can find a new person to interview for my podcast, or meet a new person I can interview for my podcast, then suddenly you care about the topic, and now it's easier to go on network, I think. So find the reason you care.
talking about these frictions that we have to interact in the corporate world, sometimes uh, curiosity often dies because of the fear of looking unprofessional. Like you say something that it doesn't look right. Based on the secrets that you have discovered to write your book, how can a leader design a meeting environment that signals to the brain of the people that is safe to play rather than just safe to comply?
The this the simple answer, maybe it's a bit boring answer, but the simple answer is that you need to uh, lead by example. But I have a good story to exemplify it. I think this is a bit long maybe, but I think it's a good story, so I'll share it with you. This is a HR manager. Her name is Marie Helander Larsson, and she used to be an HR manager of a shoe company. And she was just recruited to this company. She has never met anyone. And I don't know, they have maybe 200 shops, so 200 HR managers. So she decided, I need to meet all my, every store has an HR manager, right? So I said, I need to meet all of these. So she organized a 2-day conference. But the night before the conference, she realized, wait a minute, what's the purpose of a conference? The purpose of the conference is to network and get to know each other. And then she looked at the program of the conference and it was full of speakers. So no time to network. So she changed, she went up and she changed the whole schedule of the conference. And then the first day of the conference, she goes up and she says, hi guys, I'm your new boss. Nice to meet you. We're supposed to be here for a 2-day conference, but I realized the program was full of speakers, which meant we could never meet. So I removed all the speakers. Here is the new schedule. It's now a 1-day conference. I only saved the breaks. And she put up a slide that said, break, break, coffee, break, break, lunch, break, break, coffee, break, break, go home. And I said, now we're going to have a whole day only with breaks so that you can talk with the people you need to talk to about the things you need to talk about without being interrupted by some speaker. I think it's a beautiful conference. It's a beautiful conference. It's a beautiful idea. It works perfectly. Everyone loved it. But most importantly, what was the message she was sending to these people that she had just met for the first time? She sent this message to them. I had a crazy idea last night, and I decided on my first day of my job to do something I've never done before. That's the kind of leader I am. You're sending the message that if I'm that kind of a leader, if you have a crazy idea, you can do it too. Leading by example.
I love that. I love that. Uh, in your book, there is a key theme, and it's about how different perspectives fuel creativity. And we have already touched a little bit about the topic. So imagine in a corporate silo, we often only talk to the people in our own department because we don't care about the others, what the others are doing. So looking at the creative minds you interviewed, was there a specific ritual on that they use to intentionally collide with the strange information or strange people?
Well, we talked about having different perspectives. So let's talk about something slightly different because the beautiful thing with creativity is that it's a paradox. Some people think that you need to be by yourself to have good ideas. Some people think you need to be together with people. You talked about how brainstorming doesn't work. It does work for some people. So it's creativity is a paradox. So I interviewed one person actually, there was also in Bhutan. She was a fashion designer in Bhutan. And she talked about what we decided to call what is that called? Fractaling. You know, a fractal. Like
Yeah, yeah,
it's like a pattern that you zoom in, it's the same pattern, and zoom in, it's another pattern, right? It's a
yes.
fractal. So fractaling is a mindset. So okay, for example, she's a fashion designer, but in her design, she wanted to understand how the fabric was done. So she went and she interviewed the people who create the fabric of the clothes that of the fabric that she was using for her clothes. But then she said, wait a minute, who does, who is their supplier? And it's like, it's a supplier of the yarn. So she said, I need to go and meet the suppliers of the yarn. So she went down and interviewed the people who were creating the yarn. And then said, wait a minute, where does the yarn come from? Actually, it comes from the sheep. Let's go and meet the sheep herders. So she would, every time she would go down one level. And then you can go far, you could go fractaling all the way down to like who makes the feed for the 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 people who are herding the sheep. And like a chef also, they do this, right? They go and they meet the supplier of the tomatoes, and then they go to the farm. So if you don't it's not like you only have to go and meet totally different people. You can also just go down the value chain of what you're doing, because think about it. a chef that learns about the suppliers of the beef will be a better chef. And a lot of people say, what is the fractaling down of the people who supply the things that you create, and how much do you know about what they're doing and how they're doing it? Because you're bound to find inspiration there that you can use. You can go the other way too. You can go to I want to meet the person who buys my clothes, the reseller. I want to go to the shops that sell my shows. I want to go interview the client that buys my shop. I want to interview the husband of the person who bought my dress because I want to understand how the husband thinks about the dress that the woman bought. You can go either way.
Mhm. And I can easily see it implemented in the corporate world. So if I'm a marketeer, I want to understand how people are going to use the image of my product or service, and understand a little bit how the sales team is communicating that. Or I can understand how the purchasing department has selected the suppliers to make my product or service. And this is
Yeah.
quite interesting as an approach.
And I mean, a lot of people will go that way to go to the clients, but to go the other way, to go to the suppliers and think how they are thinking, because suddenly you might realize, for example, there's a huge environmental issue because people are ordering this version of blue that it can only be done by using chlorine or whatever. Right? To say, wait a minute, we could have a slightly different version of blue, and suddenly our clothes would be way more environmentally friendly and maybe way cheaper to buy. So, but you don't understand that because you don't understand their process.
Mm. Fredrik, I want to go slightly more personal because I want to understand. So, were you born curious or you became curious? How did it come that you ended up devoting? And I have seen that a lot of the things that you write are related to the world of curiosity or innovation. Did it come suddenly, or how did it become a passion for you?
Well, there are many different answers. There's not one answer to how, I mean, I'm 57, so how did I end up here? It's not one answer to that question. There's many questions, many roads, many choices. But one answer is that my father was a musician and my mother was a teacher. So my father was a performer, my mother was a teacher. If you take performer and teacher and you put them together, you get keynote speakers, right? So that kind of answers we all follow in the footsteps of our parents, right? Why did I become curious? Partly because of my parents. I think my mother was a Montessori teacher, which is a great way of teaching because it focuses on the curiosity of the child. My father was a creative person, and my mother also. But I also had an identical twin. I still have an identical twin brother. But so growing up, when you were growing up, if you had an idea, you had to find a friend who would understand your idea, and that's difficult because no, your brain is different from your friends. But if you're an identical twin and you have an idea, our brains are literally the same, or the DNA is the same. The brain is, and we have the same DNA and we have the same environment because we've grown up in the same home, which means we think extremely similarly. So if I had an idea, I could tell it to my brother, and halfway through, he would finish the sentence, right? So I could now kind of brainstorm with myself, and that is very unique. So I highly recommend getting an identical twin.
I will buy one.
But the funny thing is, you're talking about AI, you can now upload all your written notes. And I mean, soon we will record more and more about ourselves. And now you can ask the AI you can even record your own voice. What they should do is you should record your own voice, and then they should have a filter that changes that voice to the voice you hear in your head, because that's different. I mean, you know this, right? When you hear yourself, you sound differently. They
Yeah.
should filter it so that you hear back your voice as you hear it, and suddenly you can now start brainstorming with an AI version of yourself in the voice that you hear inside of your head. You can hear it from your. That's actually a good. Someone should do that filter.
Absolutely. By the way, I also use it as a tool. The fact that AI has a full good knowledge about everything I say, certain beliefs that I have in terms of how the brain functions, what type of theories that I don't believe at all. So AI is becoming like a way to have this bouncing board, which is kind of a step into delivering innovation or delivering original ideas, because when we hear them back, as you said, we tend to rethink about it and go sometimes deeper or not. Certain people believes that the AI is just a crutch that we have, and it will never be able to deliver true innovation. But I have the feeling, and it's a personal thought, that we are putting the human being a little bit too up there, because our brain functions only based on connections of unrelated experiences or knowledge that we put together, and most of the time we call it innovation, ideas. So we
Not most of the time, every single time. There has never been an innovation in the history of mankind that is not a combination of already existing things. Every idea is a combination of something else. And when you realize this, of course AI can be creative, because AI can combine millions of different versions, and
mm,
now it can also start to evaluate if they think it's going to work or not. So yes, but I don't understand why people look at it as a threat.
mm,
It's not the way we should look at creativity is, okay, think about it like a shovel. Look, we used to we used to dig with shovels, and then we invented the excavator and all these tractors and all these big. Suddenly, why would I dig when we have a tractor digging, right? And now we dig way more than before, but we still dig. I actually Googled how many shovels are sold in the world per year. It was millions. We still dig with shovel. And more importantly, I just bought a shovel last year, a new one, because I like to garden. So why do I shovel? Why do I use a shovel when I technically don't need anymore? We can have robots doing it, because I get enjoyment from gardening. And creativity also gives us enjoyment. It makes us happy, fulfilled, full of energy. I mean, nothing makes us more alive, feel more alive than having a really good idea. So just because AI now suddenly also starts innovating like crazy, checking millions of different proteins or different materials and different design in CAD, 3D CAD design or whatever they will be doing, or writing poems or whatever, it doesn't mean we will stop doing it. We will just create much more ideas, and that's beautiful.
I would love to be as optimistic about that, because I'm a little bit afraid about. So I'm not afraid about this idea of using AI for innovation, and I probably believe that AI will be capable of by itself to develop the right prompt about to ask the right questions. What problems are worthwhile solving for these idiots called humans? Uh,
Mm.
I think that we are very close to that area, but what still a little bit scares me is that we as humans, we could become a little bit lazy. We could have this atrophy of the brain, not being able to think on our own, and to have a high reliance and less exercise for our brains in the area of creativity. What's your take on that?
I look at it as the calculator. If someone invented a calculator, when someone invented a calculator and showed it to the world, I think half of the world said, "Oh, this is going to make us stupid in math," because I used to be able to do all my math in my head, and now you can just punch it into the calculator. And in some ways, they are right, right?
Mm,
Because some people are not like, what's 57 plus 82, right? It takes we're not so good at doing that anymore.
yeah.
But so if we use the calculator to become worse at doing math in our head, yes, that is negative. But would we say that mankind has suffered because we invented the calculator? I would say no. We're now doing way more advanced math.
Mm.
You could say the same thing when someone invented a pen. Oh my God, I used to be able to memorize the whole Bible. Now the young people can't even memorize one verse in the Bible because it's all written down, right? Yes, it's true. There are people, historically, all human knowledge was oral because that was the only way to keep it. People could remember full books verbatim, right? Some people still do that, but most have forgotten the skill to do that. Are we worse off? I don't think so. I think the pen was a great idea. I think the calculator is a great idea. I think AI is an even better idea, and we should use it to challenge ourselves to become much better at what we are doing. I'm using it to track everything I eat and everything I train. And every day it summarizes to me the amount of calories, the amount of salt I've eaten, how that compares to my blood pressure, how much, if I added calories or not. I could manually sit and do that, but I don't want it. I just want to know exactly how my body behaved in the last day. And my brain is not doing that actively anymore as I used to do manually, but I challenge myself in other ways instead. So no, no, no. We should use it right, like
Hmm.
any new technology,
Yeah, I guess you
or
are
like
right.
any technology, old or new.
Mm, that I must say there is so many problems to be solved in general in the universe that
Yes.
I think it's close to the infinite number of options, the possibilities that we can have. So despite that AI can have access to all this knowledge and propose solutions automatically in the near future, it doesn't matter because there will always be a problem that human is worthwhile solving by a human, or a human is going to get interested.
I totally agree. There are unlimited amounts of problems in the world to solve. So when people say I saw someone posted today that some company was firing half of their employees because AI was going to do the job, and everyone was terrified. Like, oh, suddenly we need to give everyone a basic income because there will be no jobs in the future. I was thinking, what are you talking about? There's so many problems left in the world to solve, big and small. Like in my Swedish local government, it takes 28 weeks to get an approval for building a chimney, right? So there's productivity right there. And there are children starving in the world, for God's sake.
Mm.
And every time we invent a new technology, we invent new problems. I was in the slums of Manila recently, interviewing people in the slums of Manila, and I interviewed a help organization working with the children there. They said to me, Fredrik, what do you think is our biggest problems in the slums of Manila right now? What do you think? What's the number one problem that they are most concerned about? The organization trying to help these people.
Mm.
What do you think?
Oh, I would say education because you have at least an option through education. And I'm saying that from the perspective of someone who got out of slum in Peru.
Hmm. Yeah, and you're kind of right actually, but it's the smartphone. The smartphone is the biggest problem, and so why? Because the parents don't understand what a smartphone can do, and there comes bad people come with a smartphone and give it to the young girls and say, "Why, if you record yourself, we'll give you a bit of money." And the parents don't understand what their daughters are doing because they don't understand what a smartphone can do, so they don't understand sexual abuse through video on that. It's not in their world. They couldn't understand why suddenly the daughters are depressed, but they have money. So here we invent this beautiful innovation called a smartphone. Who would have thought that beautiful invention that we are using right now for video, it's great for humanity that we invented video calling, but who would have thought the slums of Manila would see that as the biggest problem because a generation of girls are being abused, right? So every new generation, when a new invention that makes our life better also creates a new problem that we need to solve. We will never be done.
Yeah, that's true. Now, coming back to the corporate world, there is this feeling that I have, as I mentioned, I am an introvert, so I have a kind of jealousy for extroverts from time to time because they're able to talk a lot and society in fact is rewarding to having answers, not doesn't reward us for having the right questions. And I have the impression that this creates like a kind of a fixed mindset where curiosity feels like an admission of incompetence, like we are not good at something. um, how can a company start measuring and rewarding the quality of questions someone asks rather than just the ideas or the outputs that people have?
I don't think I'm the right because we talked about different versions of creativity. My brain doesn't work on like measurements and tests and things like that. So I'm not the best person to say how do we measure the quality of questions. But um, I think it's I think it's sad that I agree with you. We are not rewarding people who ask questions.
Mm,
But we're also not rewarding people who look for answers. which is the second half of this, right? We need to find people to ask the right questions, but then we also need to reward people who find the right answers to this question. But I would say, okay, I'll give you an example. People are terrible at asking questions. Like I do a lot of workshop for companies and stuff like this. And we have never been taught how to ask questions in school. We've always been asked to give answers. That's where it comes from, right? School doesn't teach you how to ask questions. So if I ask people in a workshop, I'm going to put you on the spot here a bit. But for example, if we ask 100 adults, what is the biggest problem? We ask 100 employees, what is the biggest problem in your company? What do you think they will say?
Whew. I don't know. In terms of culture, I know that recognition is something that they mention
Okay,
very
good.
often.
Recognition, great. Okay, we ask 100 normal people in the country, what is the biggest problem in your country? What will they say?
Something with money.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, we asked them. Yeah, exactly. We ask 100 people, what's your biggest problem? They will say money. So you see, you did here. I said I will put you on the spot. You did the same mistake that almost everyone else does. When I ask for a problem, you are saying the opposite of a problem. Recognition is not a problem. Lack of recognition is a problem.
Yes, yes, yes.
Money is not a problem. Lack of money is a problem. If your problem is money, I can solve it very easily for me. Give all your money to me, and the problem is solved. It's lack of money which is the problem. It's not the government that is the problem. It's bad government, corrupt government. So when you ask people to define a problem, they usually define the opposite of a problem. They define what they want. And that just shows how bad we are at defining a problem. But the better you become at defining the actual problem, like let's say your problem is money. How do I double my salary within a month? That is a problem statement. That's a question, right? Or who do I know who could give me $1 million? It's the same thing. It's solving the problem of lack of money, but it's a different problem. So the more you specify the problem, actually, a really well-defined problem statement automatically answers the question. The answer is right there at the end. So you should teach people to become better at actually describing the actual problem in detail in many different ways. And when you do that, the solution is just right in front of you.
But it's almost like we are fighting against this human nature that we always believe that we have the solution. We don't, and that's why, in fact, I was doing some research, and I found out that approximately 25% of companies are using design thinking. Design thinking is a process to focus on the problem of people. But only 25% of the companies, the big companies, we are not talking about the small companies in the village, are using design thinking to go through the problem because we don't like it. We have an idea of the solution already, and our brain cannot accept that our idea
Exactly.
is good.
Yeah, no, people jump automatically to the solution without staying at the problem phase and actually what is the problem? What is actually the problem? And then we can do the fractional thing. We can go down and look at the problem, and we can go down deeper and deeper and deeper on, and then finally we find, oh, actually this is like a great advertising person will do. Go and interview all the clients, find the real problem, and then then the solution is right there. But then the second half of it is finding the right, get people to find the answer. So I told you my mother was a teacher, right?
Yes.
So, and I had children late in life. So I said to my mom, I know creativity. I'm a creativity expert. I don't know children. You're a teacher. You've seen 100,000 children. How do I raise creative children? And she said, never give the answer. So when the child will come to you with questions, because children always ask questions, and the child will come with answers like, "Father, why is the moon round?" Every parent will start to explain. I said, this is wrong. Now you're teaching your child that other people have the answers to your questions. You don't have the answers to your questions. You want to teach the child that you have the answers to the questions. So you say, "What do you think?" That's all you say. Now the child will start thinking about the reason. Or it also works like, "Dad, where's my bag?" What do you think? I think it's under my bed. So it works on the big questions, it works on the small questions. So now you're teaching the child to ask questions and find answers, which creativity needs both. Otherwise, it's not, you take away half of the formula. This works beautifully for children. And then, of course, if they come up with a stupid answer, you say, that's an interesting answer. Here is what science thinks about why the moon is round. And then you can still give them the answer, but you just hold off for 30 seconds. This works beautifully on children. I do it on my children. It's the best parenting advice, but it also works on people. I know about a Swedish boss. He had a sign behind his desk that says, "What do you think?" And people would come into his room, ask him a question, and he would just point at the sign and they would leave and turn around.
That's a good one. Oh, by the way, this I try this. What do you think? And my wife still hates me for that because my kid was 3 years old and she was asking questions about Father Christmas, Papa Noel. She was
I,
asking me if really exist, and I say, "What do you think?" And she ended up killing Father Christmas on at 3 years old, and my wife still hates me for that.
I think you did her a great service.
It has its pros and cons when talking about children, because I think that the level of lucidity for my younger child is a little bit too much when now she's in the teenage age, and I think it's makes her a little bit like a controversial person. She's always questioning others on their beliefs, and maybe that went a little bit too far. I don't want her anymore to have discussions about religion
I don't
with
worry. She's a
other people.
teenager. Don't worry. That is the definition of teenager. You should be worried if she's not doing that. But I agree with you. Anything taken to the extreme is bad. Eat enough strawberries and you will die, right? Everything to the extreme is bad. But the question is not if most people are here and no, like, most people are not at danger of questioning too much. That's not the problem in the corporate world. The problem in the corporate world is most people are just following instructions. We were just following order. We know what happens when people say we were just following orders. That scares me way more when people are not questioning.
Frederick, it has been an amazing conversation because I have learned quite a lot and I have a little bit broken certain beliefs that I had about creativity thanks to this discussion. I definitely recommend to our audience to go and get a hand of his latest book, The Wall of Creativity. I think that there is a lot to learn, especially coming from the perspective of looking at different cultures. How do they do it? And that is quite impressive because you learn much more because there is behind every interview there is nice stories that can improve our brain power or exercise our brain to and benefit the most to develop curiosity. Frederick, how else can people get hold of you if they have questions about creativity, either in the corporate world or either as an individual? Because right today there is people who wants to know on their own as an individual, how do I solve this problem? How can they reach
Yeah,
you out?
I Google my name or Google the Creativity Explorer. I'm quite active on LinkedIn when it comes. The other social media I'm not so active on, but LinkedIn I'm a top voice there, so I'm posting quite regularly. But yeah, that should
Okay.
be a good way.
I will be putting the link to your LinkedIn
My
website.
website is my name, fredrikharen.com.
Exactly. I'm going to put also your website and, of course, a link to the World of Creativity, this awesome book. Thank you very much, Frederick, because it was amazing, entertaining, and really lots of wisdom from your side. Thank you very much for spending
Uh,
time with us.
Hey, thank you. That was fun.
Have a great day.